social, economic, and racial justice. I wanted to start by thanking all of you and also thanking our attorney, Dmitry Glitzen, and his colleagues for doing such an incredible job defending the rights of our office and our movement. While working people should be angry at this outcome, as Emily said, we should not be surprised. The laws and courts and police under capitalism do not serve working people, the oppressed, people of color, those already marginalized under capitalism. They are made to hold us down. They are made to hold up the status quo of deep inequality, of violence, of racism, sexism, of ruthless exploitation of the whole working class. And as we are seeing now in multiple colors, the environment. For nearly a century, slavery was legal in the US. For nearly a century after that, Jim Crow segregation was legal. It was a system of unbelievably brutal, institutionalized racism that was enforced by every institution of American capitalism, by the laws, the courts, the police, lynchings, and murders without convictions. Jim Crow was defeated by the civil rights movement, but racist violence continues. Today we have police murders. Seattle has police murders of black and brown people without convictions. We know what the American ruling class is capable of doing to defend its system and its profits. We should in no way be surprised that with the awakening of another generation fighting against racism, that they face an epidemic of police violence against them, or that this violence is being defended by both major political parties, because it's not just the racist in the White House, but Democratic mayors and Democratic led city councils around the country who have backed up the vicious crackdowns by the police against protest movements. We need a new party for the working class and the oppressed in this country. We should not be surprised that the courts would side with the racist police and the system rather than with this awakening movement. The ruling class is on the defensive, but they are empowering reaction. We saw how not only Trump, but a section of the mass media defended the murders in Kenosha. We see in Seattle how a section of the Democratic establishment, led up by Mayor Durkin, has gone to war against Black Lives Matter and has joined this to the effort to drive out our socialist city council office. It is likely no accident that this recall petition is almost identical to Durkin's statement calling for the council to expel me. It is no accident that three of the charges in the recall petition are a direct attack on the Black Lives Matter movement. It is no accident that billionaire Trump donor Martin Seelig is supporting the recall effort. It's no accident that the recall effort is being represented in court by John McKay, a former US attorney under George W. Bush, a former corporate vice president, and I hear a close personal friend of someone you may know, Jenny Durkin. It is no accident that my sleazy corporate backed opponent from last year, Egan Orion, is supporting this campaign. It's no accident that the recall campaign is hiding the source of their $40,000 in funding, keeping it anonymous. It is no accident that at the same time that this recall campaign is taking place, Bezos and Amazon executives are trying to punish working people for the Amazon tax by attempting to move more jobs out of Seattle. They are afraid, the ruling class and the right wing are afraid of us, of the movement against racism, of the workers' movement, of the socialist movement. They are afraid that regular people, working people, are fighting back on a scale and with a passion that these rotten corporate politicians and billionaires have not seen in a long time. They are afraid, based on what we have already won, of what we could win in the future. We know that nearly half of those polled in July in both Washington and in the Seattle area, said that they had lost employment income during the pandemic, and that an estimated 27% of adults in the United States had missed their rent or mortgage payments for July, according to a US Census survey. We know that nearly 45% of Black renters and 24% of Hispanic or Latino renters said they missed their June rent. We know what is coming down the pipe. And the ruling class knows that too, which is, and I hope it will be, a massive and historic renters' rights movement, and specifically and immediately a movement to cancel rent, mortgage, and utility payments for all of this year. They know that working class confidence builds on past successes. And that is why it is not a surprise that they are going after us. And we should also not get demoralized because they went after us, because this is what happens when you have one class, the capitalist class, and their representatives, extremely powerful in terms of their political influence and their wealth, going against a growing confidence of the working class. We will appeal this court ruling. We will continue the fight in court against this attempt by the right wing and big business to have a do over of our election victory last year. We will also take the fight on the street. We will launch a massive grassroots campaign against this right wing recall effort. And make no mistake, our opponents don't just want a do over of the election, they would like a do over of the historic Amazon tax, of all the landmark renters' rights victories we have already won, of the historic $15 minimum wage, of every victory working people have won in Seattle over the last 6 years. They're already attempting a do over of our landmark ban against chemical and other so called non lethal weapons used by the police against protest movements. This recall campaign is an attack on all of those victories and an attempt to block future ones. Just as the repeal of the 2018 big business tax was part of a broader right wing anti homeless and big business offensive, this recall is part of an overall right wing reaction against Black Lives Matter and against social movements generally. This recall attempt is also a huge attack against the proven principled leadership of our socialist city council office, an elected office that has never bowed to the pressure from either big business and the billionaires, or the pressure that comes from politics as usual, the pressure to get along with others at the top, which implies selling out the working class people and oppressed people my office stands with. It is important that the City Council yesterday voted 7-1 in favor of supporting funding for our legal defense against the recall effort. At the same time, those who get elected wanting to use their position to fight alongside the working class face the relentless pressure of respectability politics or civility politics. So we need to keep building our pressure against this establishment, and we need to begin to prepare the ground for our grassroots campaign. Our movements need unity against the right wing and against big business, and we need it now. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, quote, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to quote unquote order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is a presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, unquote. He was right. And this has been our experience every single day since we were elected. One of our great stumbling blocks is liberal leaders siding with reaction rather than working people and the oppressed in the name of holding the peace or avoiding tension. Liberal leaders at that time told MLK and other great radical leaders of the era that they should, quote unquote, go slow. They were told to stay in their lane. When MLK was famously attacked by mainstream civil rights organizations, including, sadly, leaders in the NAACP and the Urban League, for his statements against Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and in favor of a broad multiracial working class movement. I say this not to equate our current fight in Seattle or least of all myself with those struggles or the leaders of that era. I say it because we need to be prepared for this as well. The world is catching on fire in more than one sense. In this era of capitalist crisis, of economic crisis, health crisis, climate catastrophe, now the raging wildfires along the West Coast, we must completely reject the idea of the moderate liberals that we should go slow, that we can return to the imagined nostalgic stability of some bygone era of capitalism. No, we need radical change. We need socialist change, and we need it now. We knocked on over 200,000 doors last year to defeat the richest man in the world. We will do the same and more in this fight because our council office isn't and never has been about me personally. It is a seat for working people. It is a support and a launch pad for working class movements, and we will defend it. In the coming weeks, the next stage of the people's budget, the defund SPD struggle, the movement against racist policing will begin. And we will go on the offensive also for the very, very important and urgent movement that we need to organize for renters and others who are struggling in our society to cancel rent, mortgage, and utility payments. And so, if you are eager to jump on this fight and to send a strong message to the ruling class what the working class movements and the movements of the oppressed are all about, then join us at our committee meeting on Tuesday, September 22nd at 2 p.m. when we will begin the discussion of how we can build the movement to cancel rent, mortgage, and utility payment. We know the climate catastrophe proves that we cannot wait for billionaires, for the fossil fuel overlords, for the big bankers, for the politicians that represent their interests to finally do something to address the crisis we face. We know that's not going to happen. We need to build our own independent movements, which includes workers and their unions in the fossil fuel sector itself. Because at the end of the day, if we don't fight for democratic public ownership of the fossil fuel industry by workers for our society, there is no hope. And we will expect obstacles. There will be obstacles, and we will have to rise above those obstacles because that is what is required if we are to save our human society, if we are to address the miseries that so many billions of us face, and if we are to have a safe and habitable planet. I hope you will all join us in this ongoing struggle. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Kshama, and I hope everyone will stay with us for just a brief moment. Every one of us knows that this is going to be an all-out fight, and what, of course, every all-out fight means is that we have to raise resources to do that. We know that Martin Selig's pockets are bottomless. We know that Jeff Bezos's pockets get deeper every single minute, and that these are the forces that we are arrayed against. And as such, I am going to make the appeal that you help us build our fight back. Unfortunately, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, so I'm going to just say the name of the website until we can maybe figure that out. But it's kshamasolidarity.org. It's a very bare bones website. We've had to pull it together at the last minute. But if you can please go to kshamasolidarity.org, I'm going to make the appeal of a couple of numbers and put them out there, and I'm going to motivate them because I'm going to start high. I'm going to start at 500. If anyone here today can give $500, like as I said, we are against the most wealthy and powerful forces in our society with bottomless pockets. And we need to counter these attacks with the power of working class people. And so that's why we're starting with a bold ask that will actually help us fund, leaflets to talk to people, to counter the misinformation that we see from the Seattle Times and from other mainstream media sources. I think another number that I want to actually plug that I think is actually really powerful and important right now is if anyone can give $250. We just won almost $250 million a year in taxes on the biggest businesses here in Seattle, the Amazon tax, which is no small reason, as Kshama said, of why the ruling class would like to take Kshama out of office. To gut that to defend the Amazon tax, to fight for even bigger victories on the horizon that we desperately need. I'm asking for people to give $250 right now. And I'm going to just kind of keep going down, and people will know in their minds like where they are, because we know that people are economically struggling right now. It takes talking to our coworkers, to our neighbors, to our community members, to other people at our faith networks about building these fights, because while Jeff Bezos maybe makes $1 million a day, many of us are trying to figure out how we're going to make rent, how we're going to get through. And it's going to take massive victories, movement victories to actually survive the situation. The other number that I'm going to motivate is one that you guys will all be very familiar with. It's, you know, for many working class people, 15 is a very iconic number, $15, in honor of the landmark victory that Councilmember Sawant's fighting strategy delivered within 6 months of being in office. You know, for many of us struggling to make rent, figuring out how to survive this triple pandemic of COVID, racism, and the climate catastrophe, $15 or even less can be a massive sacrifice. But collectively, it does add up because we have people power where they have Martin Selleck. So please stay tuned. Please follow us on social media. Please pay attention to your email because we know, you know, there will be an appeal that we'll be fighting for. It'll probably happen in about a month because the courts are clogged up right now. But, you know, we need people to spread the word, to give their personal endorsements. As I spoke to this morning, obviously, like, finances are an important part of that at KshamaSolidarity.org. But also importantly, you know, getting testimonials of why you're part of this fight. We've seen, you know, that they would like to hide behind sort of community members and pretend that those are the people who are pushing this recall effort. That's really not the case. We have to unveil that. But we know that the fight to preserve Kshama's office, to build our movements, that's made up of normal working class people. And so, you know, if you are listening today, if you can tweet, if you can put on your Facebook page and tag us at #KshamaSolidarity and say why you're fighting for this, why this is important, why having a fighter for working class people, why it's important to have a fighter for working class people to stay in office, and say, you know, why you as a worker, as a union member, as a student, as a member of the Black Lives Matter movement, know that this is important. So thank you again to everyone for making it out, not just once, but twice today. We will stay in touch. We'll keep building our movement. Thank you again, Solidarity. I just got an update, so much with the power of everyone in this room. Sorry about kind of preemptively ending, I guess. Zoom is a weird terrain, but we have already raised over $3,500, which is massive. That's such a huge accomplishment for the people in this room, for this movement that we're going to have to keep building. And, you know, this doesn't have to be over. Again, if you sort of share the website and a testimonial about why you're involved with this, we can keep that number growing throughout the evening, striking while the iron is hot and helping us build our resources to fight back against billionaires who want working class fighters out of office, who want to intimidate people from speaking out against the mayor who has authorized tear gassing children, who want to you know, silence the voices of our movement by intimidating some of the most visible elements of them. So solidarity and good night.